Welcome to everyone on this wintry January day. I want to welcome all of you to class. This is STEM 351, Communication Technologies, and I am Virginia Jones.
Please note this recording contains information from last year, which was cold and wintry also, but we will go over the same syllabus and course schedule, but please refer to the one in Blackboard for the most current date.
First, let's talk about the basic structure of the class and how we want to do things. First, you should have seen the syllabus in Blackboard, but here is a copy of the syllabus, and you see it includes the sections and talks about how this is an asynchronous class. Look at the course objectives and make sure that you understand what the objectives of this class will be. I have highlighted one of the objectives because this is going to be your overarching goal in this class. Your culminating activity will be to develop this e-learning lesson to teach a domain-specific critical thinking skill. So think about something that if you are already working or if you are still just a full-time college student, but what's one specific thing that you could teach someone in a short amount of time, probably not more than 10 or 15 minutes, but one specific skill that you could develop and design it properly using the skills that we will discuss in this class. So this is going to be your final project, but you need to start thinking about it early on and how you would like to develop a lesson that you think would teach the content in the way that you need to. You'll see the text is here, and it is also listed with the bookstore. You can order this, however you want to. Also, you need to make sure that you understand about APA, which is the formatting that we use for this class. I've also put a section on Blackboard called APA Tips and Hints that will help you with some resources posted there. You'll also see in the syllabus all of the assignments are listed. We are going to do what's called e-learning lesson critiques. We're going to do 7 of these that will be 15 points each to add up to 105 points or 21% of your grade. We also will do team chapter presentations, which we'll talk more about later. Each of the teams who are not presenting will have to do evaluations on the other team's presentations, and these are worth 20 points altogether. We also have discussion boards and some quizzes, and then the final project, as I just told you, will be the biggest part of your class project. Also, class participation is 25 points for a total of 500 points in this class. Now, for those of you, most of you are probably very familiar with using points, so you know how to do this, but there's an example written here so that you will know that if your project's worth 200 points and you earned 175, you take the numerator, the number on the top, 175, divided by 200 to get your final grade for that. So we're talking about APA again, and this talks about how you should make sure that you follow the formatting that you need. Please, when you submit your assignments, submit them with your last name and your first name, and then the name of the assignment. It's not quite as important to make sure you have the STEM 351 in there, but that does help you keep track in case you're taking more than one class. But please submit it as a Word document, a Pages document, or some other type of word processing document. I would prefer that you not submit it as a PDF because I like to make inline comments, and it's just a little more complicated to do it that way. You see how the grading scale is. I do have pluses and minuses, and you'll also see how the points correlate with the grades for the class. If you turn in work late, you will have 1 point per day deducted if it's received at the specified due date and time. Now, normally the due date, according to Blackboard, is 11:59 p.m. the day of the assignment. I mean, if you turn it in at 12:05, that's not a big deal. But if you don't turn it in until 6 or 7 o'clock the next day, then that is different. So if you have something that comes up, please contact me and I will work with you to make sure that you don't lose points for your assignment. The rest of this is pretty much normal things that you see in the syllabus. The course schedule is located in Blackboard, and I'm going to pull that up in just a minute to look at it. You do have to be able to use word processing and other computer programs, especially Microsoft Office, because you could use PowerPoint or other programs for your final assignment if you want to. And we're also going to have some free Web 2.0 tools that you could use. You need to make sure that you participate so that you don't lose the points. In here it says email policy. Make sure that you use your ODU email. And I try to be extremely prompt about answering email. Sometimes they do get lost, so if you don't hear back from me within less than 24 hours, email me again, because I do have about 6 different email accounts, so oftentimes they do get lost in the shuffle, but I do try to keep on top of that. The rest of this is just pretty much the normal stuff that you have in a syllabus. The class schedule that we have is also posted in Blackboard, and I've tried to make sure that it's pretty clear and everyone can understand. This is the first week of class, and your first assignment is going to be to evaluate a sample lesson, and we're going to go over chapter 1, and then you go through all of them. The one thing that I do want to point out to you is in week 4, which is the end of January through February the 5th, we're not going to have class notes per se, but I'm going to have office hours available probably 2 nights during that week, and I'll probably take a quick poll to see which would suit people the most, so that the teams can talk and we can discuss and talk about things for the team presentations in case anyone has any questions. And then we go back to the regular class, and you have a quiz that'll be due that's also located under the assignments tab in Blackboard. And then starting on February the 13th, team number 4 will do the first presentation. And the lists of teams and their presentations are all also posted in Blackboard. You also have a team group site where you can correspond with each other and work on this presentation. The rest of it's pretty much normal. Of course, everybody knows spring break is March the 6th through the 12th, so that's a good time for you to rest and relax, but also don't forget to think about your final project. And then our final project is going to be due on April the 27th, which is a Thursday, so that's a little different, because normally I have each assignment due on the last day of the week. I run the weeks from Monday through Sunday, so normally your assignments are not due until Sunday evening, but this one will be due on April 27th, so I have time to grade them and get them all in so that you can get your final grades. So navigating in Blackboard, like I said, I've got something in there to help you with your APA. We have assignments, we have discussion boards, and this is my contact information, which is also in Blackboard, but just in case you need to have it so that you can contact me, this is where you can get in touch. As I mentioned, we will have team projects, and the team assignments are in Blackboard. Each team will collaborate on this chapter and provide a basic e-learning presentation, and I'll talk some about the virtual office hours. There is a list of all the teams, and this is posted in Blackboard also. And my hyperlink doesn't want to come up, but this talks about your presentation, so this is some guidelines on what you need to do for your presentation. and you can read through it. You can use any presentation tool that you would like, PowerPoint, Keynote, Prezi, or another one if you're familiar with it. The bottom line is, if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask me. So let's begin with Chapter 1, which is E-Learning, the Promise and the Pitfalls. And here's a copy of the text just for your review. So what is e-learning? Our text defines this as instruction that's delivered on a digital device that is intended to support learning. So if you look on page 8 of the text, you'll see that they list a lot of different things that e-learning should do and things that we will examine. E-learning can be synchronous, asynchronous, it can be a blended class, it can use the internet, it can be professional training you receive on the job, which might use the internet or be cloud-based. E-learning, especially today, uses a lot of media elements. It can also use learner collaboration, where a synchronous class might have breakout rooms, or asynchronous may use online quizzes or discussion boards. But basically, e-learning is to help develop a skill for individual learning or organizational performance goals. So as you can see from the definition that we talked about, there are three major elements that should be included in e-learning: the what, the how, and the why. E-learning should include content, obviously, the information presented with a technique or an instructional method to help the learners learn the content. How e-learning is presented is by different digital devices in any format. It's the E of the e-learning. And the why. Why do we do e-learning? Because we want to help learners achieve personal learning objectives. So is e-learning better than traditional learning? This is something that has been discussed for many years since e-learning began. Computer-based training started back in the 60s and was used quite frequently. Currently, it is probably 55 or more percent of learning that takes place. The Army was one of the biggest users of a type of e-learning where they had film and film strip presentations for the soldiers. And they did a research study, and they decided that using this modality provided better learning results than having actual classroom instruction. But research from different years, 94, 98, 2001, 2004, and on, shows what they call achievement effect sizes, which is something we'll talk about later in this course. But this research basically compared electronic distance education, which is what they used to call e-learning, to traditional classroom education. So you see, when you look at effect size, the thing that you see is that most of the results cluster right here, so that the effect size right here from 0, there's not much deviation, less than 1/4 of a percentage point. So the thing that we want to remember about e-learning is when the instructional method remains essentially the same, so does the learning, no matter which medium you use. So no matter whether you do it with e-learning or face-to-face, as long as the instruction is essentially the same, students will learn. So what are some of the promises of e-learning? E-learning offers customized training and instruction. If you think about it, we mean that this is where you can tailor the content and the methods and the way that you navigate through the program based on the need of individual learners. Think about programs where you learn how to use a new software program, or where you learn to do something. Maybe you've seen a YouTube video. That would be a most current type of informal e-learning, where you want to learn how to replace maybe the spigot in your bathroom sink, and you can find a YouTube video to help you learn that. Another promise of e-learning is the engagement, because we know all learning requires engagement, but in e-learning we have two types of engagement that happen. We have behavioral engagement, which means it's an overt action that a learner takes during instruction. So some of this is, you pressing the forward arrow, typing an answer, clicking in an option, or doing different things that require interaction on the part of the learner. Psychological engagement means the cognitive processing of the content in a way that helps the learner acquire new skills and new knowledge. Another promise of e-learning is multimedia, and we are all aware that multimedia has really changed the face of e-learning. We have text, we have audio, you can incorporate videos, we have Prezi, we have so many different ways to bring about e-learning using different multimedia tactics. So it's really been a big bonus to e-learning to have the use of multimedia. Acceleration of expertise is something that we don't always think about, but historically, for you to become an expert in an area, it usually took you about 10 years to become an expert at a certain skill or craft. And in some workplaces, you may not always get the opportunity to fine-tune those skills and develop the skills that you need, because you don't always have the opportunity to do this. So having simulations and opportunities where you can do the work in a simulated e-environment has helped people gain more expertise. And then the last is digital games, and we know that digital games came on the scene of e-learning with a little bit of controversy attached to them, because a lot of professors and public educators thought that we didn't want to turn education into a game for students. We weren't there to provide entertainment. But new research has shown that gaming actually helps learners engage, and it helps them think more critically and develop skills. Some of the characteristics of games is that they have rules in a simulated system. They respond to the player when the player makes a move. It is challenging. It is cumulative, so you achieve different levels or you reach certain areas towards your goal. And above all, it's very inviting because it offers appeal and interest to the user. So these are all things that we like about e-learning. Now, pitfalls of e-learning, too much of a good thing. Sometimes we have a tendency to want to overdo this, so we don't want to have every flash and every bang and every picture and every animation you can. If you can think back when people used to use PowerPoint and they would have every animation possible on the presentation, and people would sit there and go, really, I cannot stand this. So that's too much of a good thing. And we want to be conscious of that. You've got to find that sweet spot where it's just enough to engage, but not too much to distract from the learning process. So the second one ties into this, not enough of a good thing. You don't want to have just a wall of words, not just text. You have to have things that engage the learner in different ways. Another problem with e-learning is losing sight of the goal. We always have to make sure when we are developing a training that the key skills that we are trying to present are going to promote organizational goals and build the training around the tasks that make those skills. Sometimes as technologists, we get caught up with the technology and want to do learning based on whatever's the latest craze in technology. So we have to be very careful and make sure that we use the technology that will best leverage the learning of the people we are presenting it to. And the last pitfall is discovery learning, because we all know how easy it is to discover and learn things on the internet. In fact, Google is now a verb, because if you need any information, you don't look it up the way you used to. You just go Google it and find out information. So one lesson we've learned from this is that pure discovery learning rarely works. We still have to have some structure that's going to provide appropriate guidance for our learners. So we have two major guidelines that apply to e-learning, and we have to decide what type of e-learning we are seeking to provide our learners. One is to inform. We're just presenting information. We're just saying this is, something about the history, a historical thing, a new product, features of a new product. Or is this something that's going to have perform, something that they need to have procedural skills to understand? If you look on page 19, you'll see table 1.1 gives you a nice little chart of this. So when we talk about two types of performance goals, they fall into two different categories, and we call them near and far transfer, which sounds a little different at first, but when you think about it, it makes sense. You have what's called a procedural performance goal, and that promotes near transfer. What that is something like if you're learning a new software product, because there's usually one correct way to perform that skill, so it's pretty lockstep in what you learn. You learn that this is the way you do it always. Strategic is considered the type of promotes the transfer of far transfer, because this is more general, it's more strategic, it's multiple ways to achieve a particular outcome. And examples of this would be when people have to use their own judgment, so they're learning soft skills, supervision, or management skills in a type of training. We also have e-learning architecture that we need to be aware of. And although all e-learning is delivered on a particular digital device, different courses reflect different assumptions of learning, which we introduce here and describe. So we have different types of architecture based on learning assumptions. So we have receptive, where you're acquiring information; directive, where you're trying to strengthen your responses and your skills; or guided discovery, which we talked about a little bit as a promise of e-learning, where you construct knowledge in a guided way. Now, these architectures also deal with the levels of interaction learners have with the learning, and there is a table 1-2 on page 21 that you can look at. But receptive has low behavioral engagement, directive has medium, and guided discovery has high. So what does this mean? When you have receptive architecture, it means you have very low engagement. So this goes back to your types of training where you're just presenting a new product, or you're just giving a history of something. You're just giving them information with few opportunities for them to respond. Directive uses the classic training example we all understand, where they give you an explanation, give you an example, question, and then feedback. Guided discovery often is in the simulations, but it's where learners perform the task while they're still receiving guidance from the program. And this encourages both behavioral and psychological engagement. So what is effective courseware? This is the intent of our learning and discovery in this course. So we want to talk about what's really going to make our training modules that we develop effective for our learners. So we have three overarching constructs for effective courseware. One is our training goals. We need to make sure that our goals or our intended outcomes, they will influence what kind of courseware you want to use, and that you have to make sure that the guidelines that you use to develop your goals are appropriate for what you want the learners to learn. You have to make sure that you are conscious of the visuals, the narration, and the text that you use to present the information, because you want to help your learners achieve skills. You also need to be aware of learner differences. Lessons should include instructional methods appropriate to learner characteristics. Something that is very important to understand is learners' prior knowledge of course content, because that exerts the most influence on how much people will actually learn from the training. Learners with little knowledge will benefit from different instructional strategies than learners who are relatively experienced. For this course, we're mostly going to talk about guidelines that we use for adult learners who are new to this type of course content. And the last factor that we want to talk about is the context. And that includes such issues as technical constraints of the delivery platform that you're using, the network, the authoring software, the policies related to the learning management systems that your learners might be using, cultural factors in the institutions, such as the acceptance of and routine familiarity with technology, and then different restraints such as those related to budget, time, and management expectations. There are a lot of things that you have to consider, and sometimes you have to let those be your basic guidelines when you're developing your learning. So to conclude this week's brief chapter, I want you to realize that you do have an assignment that will be due next Sunday evening, and you need to find a training or learning example that you can use for several assignments throughout this course. Find one that you can analyze for a type of e-learning, how it uses multimedia, and other principles of e-learning. So that concludes our introduction to Chapter 1. If you have any questions or comments, you can send me an email and I will be glad to respond. Thank you, and stay safe and warm this week.